Welcome to the EQ Podcast. All right, welcome to the EQ Podcast, a show focused on equipping ministry leaders within the Pacific Northwest. I'm your host, Zach Lamberson. I have with me Pastor Steve Winery, as always, not always, but most of the time. And we're excited to have on the show today Senior Pastor of Calvary Chapel Flathead Valley, David Mercer. You're in Montana, and how's the weather there, David?
It is hot, like a lot of other places.
Wait, what's hot to you?
Hot is in the 90s. When it gets up to 100, that's pretty warm here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty hot. I'll give you that. So, David, you've been the lead pastor in Kalispell for over a decade now. Could you give us a little background on how you got called into the ministry, and then eventually how that calling landed you in the Flathead Valley?
Yeah, so we've been in the valley for about 22 years, and we helped plant the Calvary Chapel up in Whitefish. And I was in a period of transition after that church was rolling, and we got a call in 2009 that this little church needed a guest pastor. And the Calvary Chapel here at Flathead Valley has been here since 1982, not at this site, but it's the oldest Calvary Chapel in Montana. And I said, well, yeah, I'll come and teach. And so I came out the next Sunday, and it was in a snowstorm in April in Montana. And you can get snow anytime during the year out here. But we came down this long 2-lane country road all the way down to this church, and a woman greeted us out the door. She opened up the door. It was me and my wife and my 3 little kids, and she goes, "Oh, you actually came." It caused me to realize right off the bat kind of the struggle that the church had been going through, and I found out that they had been without a pastor for 3 months, and before I even taught, we were praying in a small room, and this one lady looked at me and she said, "Would you be our pastor?" I said no, but I said, "I'll help you. We'll get a board going. We'll help you with your finances, and we'll get a pastor here that will love you and teach the word." And so, basically over the course of a few months, God did not let us leave, and by the grace of God, that was 14 and a half years ago.
That's fantastic. So you said you're involved in a number of church plants in the area. Was it just the one in Whitefish?
Yeah, just the one in Whitefish.
So how'd you guys get there in the first place? I guess would be my initially. Go back even further. Let's draw the curtain back a little bit more. Where'd you come from? What brought you to Montana?
So I was born on a military base in Missouri. Or is that too far?
Okay, that's too far.
A little too far.
So I grew up in Southeast Idaho in a town called Pocatello.
Yep.
And I was a part of the Calvary Chapel there since about 92. Winter of 92 is when I first set foot into a Calvary Chapel. And that just revolutionized my faith. Imagine that, verse by verse teaching. And you get excited about your faith and you start learning about the Lord. And after going to Bible college and graduating in 97, I met my wife there at the church in 1997. And we got married in 1998, and we served there at Calvary Chapel for 4 years. And then God was putting it on our heart to plant something, to go somewhere, to do something. And we didn't really know what it was. Well, my wife is from Whitefish, Montana. And so that's the connection.
There's your connection.
We would come up and visit her parents, and there was kind of a dream where she said, "You know what? If the Lord would call us to Montana and I could be with my parents and help out, that would be just really, really great." And then the Lord opened up the doors, and so we moved up here January of 2002.
What was your role? I was curious, in that support of someone else's ministry. They're planting the church. Kind of what were you doing during that time? You were there for a number of years before you moved to Kalispell. So what did your role look like during that time? And how did you help, that church kind of get off on its, own 2 feet, I guess?
The one in Pocatello?
No, the one in Whitefish.
Oh, well, that one was a plant from zero. So I was on the board. I helped out. I was also the treasurer. I taught a lot, and I also led worship.
Okay, and so you kind of kept those roles.
You did a lot of, I did a lot of things. And then the guy that I planted with, his name is Chet, and he did a lot of the teaching. And then we had some other people, in supportive roles, from children's ministry to sound and, worship teams and whatnot. But it started out pretty small, and, grew from there. And they've got a healthy church up there in Whitefish.
Yeah. Awesome.
So your church that you're at now, you said it started with just a handful of people. You mentioned over text message that there's probably about 3 of those people still around that you haven't scared away.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen growth, and obviously God's doing a work there in that area, which is neat. And so could you kind of walk us through the early years and what those look like, and maybe, just seeing how God was moving and working, and just maybe some highlights of what God has done for you guys in that ministry?
Sure. When we first came, and on the first Sunday that I taught, there were 9 people in a sanctuary with 67 seats. And so right off the bat, the Lord was speaking to my heart about just minister to the people that are there. Mm-hmm. And then being involved in some larger ministries, I really had to scale back what we were involved in and what we did. And that came later, but there was no debt at the church, but there was hardly any people, hardly any income coming in with the tithe. And then the building was dilapidated. And then the people, they kind of had an interesting parallel with just the people had been neglected and the building had been neglected. Yeah. And so one of the, when we came, the first thing that they would do is they'd give us a little honorarium, and all they could afford on a Sunday was $25 at that time. And then it progressively got a little bit more. But I remember that first summer we painted the church, and that was a big expenditure. I think the total cost to paint the church at the time was about $770. But it really got people excited. It got people, rallied around, serving together and just investing into their church building. And it paralleled the spiritual investment of just teaching the people the word week in and week out. But I did everything, right? So you preach, you lead worship. My wife was instantly the children's ministry director.
Right.
And
did anybody ask her if she played the piano?
No, she didn't play. She doesn't play the piano.
Did anybody ask her if she played the piano?
Oh no, I don't think so. But she has played the bass before.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
But it was just a humble, kind of time, and you really have to invest in people one-on-one, as far as person doing sound and the ushers, and you have a lot of contact points, a lot of touch points, and then just trying to scale your ministry, and not try to do all of the big things from a larger ministry that you might be accustomed to, but just say, okay, what can we do and what can we sustain?
Oh,
no, that's good. I like that. You're in a town you planted, or not planted, but you took that church over just a couple years after Levi Lusko planted in Kalispell as well. And I've had some conversations with you about that. And I was just curious, what's your dynamic like? They're not I don't know if they're a mega church, or if you'd call, they have a lot of campuses, and some of them seem like they have 5 people at the campus, but I mean, they're definitely widespread. They're very influential in the area, especially among the youth. What has the dynamic been there for you? Because I know Levi was Calvary kind of background, but he's definitely not book by book, verse by verse guy anymore. So,
yeah, that's a great question. I think early on, a lot of pastors had to wrestle with that dynamic. Like, what do they do about it? Because there were people that would leave churches to go to Fresh Life or School Church or whatever they were doing, and they just had to wrestle with it. But I think that when you kind of came to the realization of Jesus saying, I will build my church and Jesus can do whatever he wants with the church. What we found out is that we ended up with people that wanted a small church. They wanted just straightforward Bible teaching. They wanted a pastor that's accessible, or they may have gotten saved at Fresh Life, and praise the Lord for that. But then they wanted to grow in the Word, and they wanted a community that they could, be known and know other people in.
Mm-hmm.
But I think everyone had to wrestle with that and just say, you know what? I'm just going to do what God's called me to do, and I'm not going to worry about what somebody else's ministry, is or isn't doing.
No, I think that's good advice. There's sometimes that, either it's jealousy or there's like bitterness towards a church like that in town. And I think if you have the right perspective to see God's using it and he's doing things there, I always celebrate churches in our town if they've got people going. Praise God. We have enough people in Tri-Cities to have everyone to have a mega church. And so it's that's the reality is we need lots of people can get saved in our town, and we want lots of people to get saved. So I appreciate your perspective on that. And you've even told me, during COVID you had, they were more locked down and you guys were not so much. What did that look like for your church?
We, as far as what we did.
Yeah. And you kind of grew. I think a lot of Calvary's, who were open did, but
right. Yeah, we did the first initial, close down for 2 weeks to flatten the curve when we didn't really understand, or people didn't really understand what everything was. And then at that time we had a very liberal governor, Democratic governor, and he started doing you can only have a certain capacity, right? So all these other, essential businesses were open, but a church, which is probably the most essential thing going on the planet, we've got to, space people out and do reservations. And we did that for about 3 weeks. And after about 3 weeks, we said, look, if you're comfortable coming, then just come. Just trying to arrange chairs and manage a reservation system was ridiculous. And then we had a mask mandate too in our state for a while. And we said, we had a little sign on the door that said, regarding the governor's mandate, we have masks inside on the shelf if you'd like to comply, but please be gracious to one another. And we had a couple people, that would wear a mask for whatever reason, but the majority are like, hey, we're going to come in, we're going to be free. And we still have, I think, one of the 2 boxes of masks that we bought early on in a storage closet somewhere.
For the next pandemic.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, people just wanted a church that was going to talk about the truth, and say, look, it's interesting what was in the media in the last year, about the virus and the origins and all the stuff. Well, how many of us that can type on a keyboard, we already knew, that spring, by February or April or May, it's like, well, okay, we live in a very deceptive world, and that the people at large are being gaslit by governments.
Yeah.
And it's just a beautiful thing to know that there's coming a day really soon where it says in Isaiah that the government will be upon Jesus' shoulder. Yeah. One shoulder. He's going to run the government the way he wants it, and it's going to glorify him.
Yeah, exactly.
That's good. By the way, you had a mask mandate. Washington State had the longest running mask mandate, so we definitely trumped you there. We had to wear masks so much longer than you. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, they said we had to wear them.
Yeah, there you go. Whether or not we complied, that's a different.
Yeah, that's a different thing altogether. David, when you're thinking about the early days at Kalispell, we got a bunch of guys with small churches, and a lot of them are, could be in exactly the same position that you're in. What would you say to a guy that's going into a church that's already established, got some people there, and maybe is struggling, maybe it's been hurt because of sin or whatever? What would you say to a guy?
For a guy coming into an existing church, I think being very real with the people and predictable. So, this church had been without a pastor for 3 months. And then before that it was just unhealthy. It was unhealthy. Mm-hmm. And so I said, you know what, if you'll have me come back, I'll teach, a topical message, or I'll teach this section of scripture, and then I'm going to do Easter, and then we're going to start the book of Matthew. And then I heard some lady said, "Wow, that's the kind of leadership that this church needs." And
Oh my
broke my
goodness.
heart. It's like you sense that as leadership. That for me, for the Bible teacher, you just say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start a book of the Bible. But I think just being yourself and being real and showing genuine concern with people goes a long way, and not trying to be flashy or pull out all your best sermons, or just faithfully teach the word chapter by chapter and verse by verse, and let the people know that you're committed. Because after about 2 years, we had a couple questions from some people, and they would say, "Well, how are you liking it? Do you think everything's going okay with the church?" And it took me a little bit, and I finally figured out that because of their background in other churches or denominational churches, they thought that I was going to transfer out at 2 or 3 years and take on a bigger church.
Oh, wow.
And I said, "No, I'm here until there's a talking donkey or a pillar of fire."
Yeah.
That's good. And your church,
That's really
I've gotten to know some of your staff, and obviously you've grown to where you've been able to bring people on. I notice your wife works at the church too, not as kids ministry director anymore, but as just an office administrator. What's that dynamic look like? Because I know some pastors would say, "Do not put your wife on staff," and so
I think it can work really, really well, or really, really horribly. I believe that for me, it's important to have clearly defined roles, in your ministry. And a lot of times that's just kind of it could be a title, hey, generally you oversee worship ministry and what goes on in the sanctuary, or generally you're facilities guy, or whatever. I think it's just important to have those roles. When it comes to what my wife Shannon is doing right now, we've had a lot of transition. So I just had a gal who was with us for a number of years as our children's ministry coordinator and our admin assistant. Well, she moved on, and so now we're kind of covering the bases, so to speak. And there's been a lot of change. And Shannon, who's really plugged in already to the culture of the church and knows people and knows what we do and the coming and going of our ministry. For a temporary person, at least we're thinking that she's temporary. It was a great fit, where we needed someone immediately in the near term. But I think it can work really good. And because she was the kids ministry coordinator for so long, we've already, it was an easy transition. It wasn't difficult.
Yeah.
No, that's good. Having clearly, defined this is what your role is and stuff. And I work with my wife here at the church, and we love working together. And we had to learn how to do that for a long time. It wasn't always easy, but I think if you have someone that you can get along with, and more power to you. Steve, I know Bobby's never been a secretary at the church. She's a principal of our school, but I think your dynamic was a little different with her.
Yeah, get her in the other building, man.
Close, but not too close.
Yeah, close but not too close. Actually, she was the secretary over at the school, and what ended up happening was the principal left, and so she kind of stepped into the role, and she's the best principal.
She crushes it.
Ever.
She's so good.
She's really good, and she kind of struggles sometimes with the whole husband-wife relationship at work and that kind of thing. And I'm kind of not joking about having her in the other building. It's like we're close and we can go to lunch together and that kind of thing. If she was going to be a secretary in here, I'd have her be somebody else's secretary. Because the husband-wife thing just gets intermixed with us. And so, yeah, but everybody loves my wife.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, she's awesome. She does a really good job.
Hey, on the church thing, regarding what I would encourage somebody coming into maybe a replant or a situation where there's something broke at the church and you got to in. Something that I think is important too, of just being real, being predictable, and so that people know what to expect, and they can bring their friends and all that, is I think it'd be very important to understand what broke the church. what is the background, what actually happened, and talk to the people that were involved. And maybe you have to come up with a like understanding from a lot of different angles, where you don't have one person that's able to give you the whole scenario, and you kind of have to, put it together. But when we realized what happened here, we found out that there was some bad family relationships in the church, nepotism at the leadership level, and there was also legalism. And so we recognized that, and then some of the source of it came from a ministry that was a ministry that would call out false teachers and was very, very legalistic and anti this and anti that. And if you had a relationship with this person or had a picture of this person on your desk, or, it was just, all these things where they go, hey, so-and-so, attended some kind of conference where somebody else was, and because of that, you're connected with. And so that was really unhealthy. But when they said, hey, can we put out this publication on the back table? And it's a publication that we probably are all heard of. Knowing the background, I said, you know what, not right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think understanding what broke the church and helps the new leader be sensitive to moving forward into the people that they're investing into.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, and I would say too, make sure that you have a board that has your back, whether you're church planning or whether it's a reboot or a replant. You need to have people that will tell you the truth, but they're supportive of the pastor and they're supportive of the vision. I think that's so essential. So you don't have yes men, but you have men that will tell you the truth, and they trust you, and they're gonna take care of you, because you need that when there's difficulty. You need that when there's backbiting, or you get an anonymous letter that kind of affected you before you had a chance to shred it.
Yeah,
you got to have a good board.
Yeah, have that. It's amazing how the enemy can just decimate a church. And a lot of times we think about larger churches that have pastors that have a moral failure and all the garbage that comes from that. But I've been in situations where very small churches, 75 people in a church, and they've had something awful take place, and it just goes on for decades, especially when you're talking about smaller towns. The repercussions of that can just be really bad. Yeah. Good wisdom there, knowing what went on and just being sensitive to how people are still taking that after a period of time. Yep.
It's interesting. My next question was about church government, because you mentioned your board and having the board have your back and having guys you can trust, but that will keep you accountable. Calvary's are Moses style, and I assume you are. I didn't ask you, but Moses style leadership. What are some of the advantages of that government style? Because I know there is, even in the Calvary movement, there are guys kind of wafting between, well, maybe I don't want to have all that power, because they see guys who fall and they fail. And I do feel like there's a real advantage to the Moses style of leadership.
Yeah, I've always looked at it like pastor-led, board-supported. And it's sort of hard to represent on an org chart, with the lines. But we have a board that will, make sure that, I get time with my wife, and, I've got a board member that will ask me, hey, when are you going to peel this thing off of your plate and hand that off, those type of things. And then we also have pastors on staff too, which are elders, and we're doing, the day-to-day kind of ministry, and we bounce all kinds of stuff off of each other and whatnot. But I think it's good that you have a group of guys that you have to explain things to, and they ask questions because they're not in the day-to-day. I have one of our board members, because of his travel and where he lives and where he goes and what he does for business, we don't see him a lot here. And so I have to a lot of times explain things from a ground zero point, or he asks questions that I wasn't really thinking about, which I think is really healthy. I think it's really good.
Yeah.
I think that's good, that mixture of having guys who are in the day to day too, and then also having some guys that you like. I think that's kind of a helpful perspective, I guess, is the best way to put it. Just to be able to run things healthy and keep people informed and all that stuff. So,
And one
And
of
I
the
really
one of
like
the
the concept of having elders being somewhat elder, where they have the experience in business or ministry. And I've got we have a 4-member board right now, and I'm one of them. So there's 3 other gentlemen on the board, and they all have different personalities with different giftings and backgrounds, different levels of business and understanding, reading financial reports and whatnot. But I just really love that perspective. And I know that I've got the right guys on the bus, so to speak.
yeah.
And if I have one guy peel off, I've never been quick to replace a board member just because I need a warm body. I think that is a big mistake. It's easy to get someone on. It's hard to get them off if they don't agree with the direction of the church or the vision or
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. One of the things that I think happens many times with church government is people come down. They think that the Moses style is too authoritarian, and they'll talk about you need to have accountability and that kind of thing. And I think that's absolutely true. But when you look at church government, the problem is that it's church government. You got people involved with it, and so if you got a pastor who's not following Jesus, then you're going to have problems. And if you have board members that aren't following Jesus, then you're going to have problems. And
Yep.
so it's going to be a problem one way or another. And I'm like you. I like having guys on my board who are informed and will tell the truth and give me their perspective and that kind of thing. One of the things that happens with that I've noticed with bigger churches is I cannot expect my board members to run my church.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's happening with the pastors on staff. And so it starts getting to a situation where they literally cannot do the business. They have to be guys that are there to give you advice and see the big picture and again be able to hold you accountable and that kind of thing. But really, when I look at what's happening around here, I have a lot of trust and I have to rely a lot on my leadership in the church. And so the whole church leadership thing has a tendency to morph over time. And you still want those good rock solid foundations and in the situation that you're in. But you got to have godly guys. You got to have guys who they know where you're going and know why you're doing the things that you're doing. And man, if you don't, there can just be such turmoil that comes from that. Yeah.
Years ago, John Michaels, my mentor, taught me at Bible college. He talked about quadrants, 4 quadrants, and he drew out this plus on a napkin. It was at a restaurant, and he said, "You know what? When it comes to boards and staff and your pastors and your volunteers, everybody's got a quadrant. So your board members don't come on site, and they're not the boss of the staff or the other pastors."
Exactly.
Running volunteers. That's your role. And he just wrote this out, and I've always remembered that. And I've got a board member that just reminded me, of that too. Like one of the key things that he's learned over the years is those quadrants, where you've got the board, you have the pastors, you have staff and volunteers, and everybody's got to stay in their quadrant, and it works really well.
Yep. Stay in your lane.
Yeah, stay in your lane.
Just I'm gonna float this out there, Dave, because you mentioned it's hard to get rid of a guy once you bring him on. We started doing a number of years ago term limits for elders, and so they serve for 2 years, and then we have a handful of guys that we kind of rotate through. But it's like it just makes it a lot less awkward, and guys have the expectation, okay, I'm only gonna be here for a couple of years, I might be off a year and back on after a year. but it does make it a lot easier to not, if there's a guy we don't want on the board, to be like, all right, probably not gonna,
Your term's over. Yeah.
moving on.
Right. I love the idea of rotating. So you have a new guy, you have a middle, term guy, and you got a guy that's about ready to pop off. But what I've found and while that works, on paper, in small churches, we don't have that kind of pool, or in a rural ministry. So we do have that mechanism in our bylaws where I believe it's a 2 or 3 year term. I'd have to look it up. But then we also have we've given ourselves our own permission to re-up if necessary. So if things are cranking and there's no reason for them to rotate, then why lose somebody who's really good and you've been with for, like one board member, he's been on since the beginning and traveled the world with him, and we've been on mountain peaks together, and he's so faithful. So why would I want him to rotate off when he's totally comfortable, serving as a board member? So that's the way we do that.
Yeah.
No, I think Steve made the point, depending on what that size is, that dynamic changes. And so when you're a smaller church, that's not as feasible. But I like that. You said you've been on mountaintops. You're also in the valley. So there you go. You've been high and low together. A few more questions. We call this a lightning round. So just a real quick answer to these questions. Number one is, who's your go-to pastor, dead or alive, to listen to?
I love listening to Joe Foch and Damian Kyle.
Yes.
Both are alive.
Yeah, both are. Yeah, they're still alive. Recent good read, a book you've read that you'd suggest to other pastors to read.
Gentle and Lowly by Dane Ortland.
Okay. Lastly, one piece of advice you'd give for someone in full-time ministry.
I would say encourage your teams, the people that are serving with you, whether it's the people in the sound booth or your ushers or your hospitality team. Figure out a way to encourage those people who you're serving with. Give them a birthday card, give them a gift certificate. Just always be as thankful as you possibly can, especially those volunteers, that volunteer their time. And just take care of your teams.
Yep.
Awesome, Dave. Thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Thanks, man.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to see you guys.
The EQ Podcast is here as a resource for our listeners. Check us out at eqministry.com. On our website, you'll find a variety of helpful tools, including past ministry conferences and a contact form to seek out help or counsel from seasoned Calvary pastors who want to encourage you in your serving or answer your ministry-related questions. Until next time, God bless.